Since we're on the topic of Elder Scrolls 6, what can you tell me about
Nothing.
where it's at?
I've never heard of it.
Lessons you've learned from Starfield.
Pretend we never announced it.
IGN's here at Bethesda Game Studios, and I'm with studio head and creative director Todd Howard. Everyone knows you, and it is really nice to catch up with you on the Starfield updates, what's happening with Fallout 76, and everything else with Bethesda Games. So I guess I want to kick things off. You know, folks know what's up with the Starfield updates now, but take me through how the team got there with thinking of how to update Starfield. You know, the game has changed. You know, we don't do expansion packs necessarily anymore. There's still DLC, but you have intermittent updates and all that. So a lot of quality of life changes, extra quests and all that. So take me through the journey of determining how to update Starfield since launch.
Yeah, it's a great question because there's so much in the game. There's kind of so much that we could do, so much the team wants to do, so much the fans want. You know, I think as we went into sort of, as we call it, year 2, there were the creations thing and the faction quests with Trackers Alliance that we have been working on and finding out the right way to kind of bundle those together. And then we have all the other features we want to do, from like the Elder gameplay to ship modules to other things. And then we start looking at, well, you could kind of chop that up and release them like this. But, you know, is there a collective way we can kind of do these things as one? And then you have the story with Terran Armada. And that really stemmed from changing the game more in like a meta way, like the way you play it over many, many hours, where it's 10 or 100, as opposed to just having a quest line that you do and then you're done.
I think a frequent topic that comes up in conversation talking about the trajectory of Starfield is how you communicate with your community, giving them what they want, but also doing something that's still true to y'all's vision with Starfield. So how do you balance that when you have millions of players ask for a million different things, but then, you know, you have limitations, you have things that you want to put in. So what's the relationship been like with folks who have stuck with Starfield since launch?
Yeah, look, we've done a whole bunch of updates since launch, but then we clearly have gone through a period where we were kind of quieter as we were putting all this content together, because we felt that, like, you know, there'll be a good time to announce it all at once, but that also, it does kind of feel a little bad for us, where you want to tell them, like, this is what we're doing. But we sort of, like, you know, breadcrumbed, hey, we're working on stuff. That only goes so far. Our community wants to know when we're really talking about it, when it's releasing, to make sure those moments for everybody playing are as exciting as possible, as informative as possible. So I guess we're looking at the community too for feedback on, you know, what do you want to hear from us, when, how. It's something we're still, I say we wrestle with it, when to talk about something.
Yeah, I want to talk about the PS5 port, because it's been, at this point, 2.5 years since Starfield's initial launch. So, like, why now? Was it technical limitations? Is there anything you could share on the business side that may have been a hurdle to get to a PS5 port? Granted that, you know, Bethesda is under the Xbox banner.
Sure.
So is there anything you could share in terms of how you finally got to a PS5 port after all this time?
Well, I think after the game came out, it was obviously a question. It was a question in the audience. It was a question for us. We've always wanted to do it. I would say that. We have a great relationship with PlayStation. You know, we've been there for a long time with our games. So I think with this one, we knew it would be a matter of time. We've been working on it for a while. So we still maintained a close relationship. We're still shipping a lot on PlayStation, people forget. Like with Fallout 76, the other updates, Skyrim, we're still doing a lot of PlayStation work, even though Starfield wasn't there. So we're just, I tell you what, so excited to get it out there on the audience.
So on the topic of the relationship with Xbox and being under that banner, you know, recent changes, drastic changes, you know, with Phil Spencer retiring, Asha Sharma taking over. What can you tell me about your relationship so far with the new leadership? I know Matt Booty's still there, so you're probably still in contact with him a lot, but how are you feeling about this shift in Xbox leadership moving forward?
Well, look, I'm of two minds, right? I'm excited whenever there's new things and where they're going in the future with the hardware. I've known about that for a while and all the plans. I will say I'm sad to see Phil go. You know, he's a good friend. He's one of the key reasons that we've been, you know, a large part of Xbox, not just after like them acquiring us, but even before that. You could see Xbox kind of being our lead platform a lot of the time. And I wish people knew, I've sat in so many meetings watching Phil Spencer and Matt Booty look at games, not just anybody's game, and wanting to protect the creative vision and find a path for success. How do we protect this? How do we make it successful? And I've seen them do that behind closed doors so many times, and I don't think they get the credit for it that they deserve. They're, great game leaders, and Asha's coming in. Everybody thinks so highly of her, so we're excited about the future.
Now, you mentioned something about hardware, so I gotta press you on it. Of course, I'm not gonna be getting any answers about what the next console looks like or anything.
I think they're talking about some stuff today, actually.
Yeah. As we're recording this, GDC is happening. I'm seeing things here and there, unfortunately.
Literally like an hour ago.
Yeah. So I'm not there right now because I'm out here. But I guess a more broad question is, as you are in the process of developing Elder Scrolls 6 and you're continuing to update Starfield, what is it about a next-gen console do you actually need and or want?
That's a great question. I think, look, we've been fortunate. We see that stuff really, really early.
Yeah.
And it's tricky for, we'll say, console manufacturers, whoever they are. They have to take a very long view of development when you sort of tape out on a chip, how you call that timing and cost, and then what does it look like 5 or 10 years after that. So it's really, really tricky kind of thing to maneuver both technically and business-wise when anyone is making a system like that where you're gonna lock it down. Our approach has always been, and because fortunately we've had such a PC audience, and we're doing it more and more going forward, which is to cast a wide net technically, to both take advantage of the very high end, but allow the game to scale down and handle. You look at handhelds now, you look at how popular those are becoming, and I think you're gonna see more of that and lower powered devices, lower powered where, say you're traveling and you wanna, underclock that thing in a certain way. We want our games to be able to handle that. So I think more than anything, when we look forward, we're less about, we are gonna make the game and tie it to this spec, which we would sometimes do in the past. So particularly in the 360 area per se, where you might be really constrained. Now they're powerful enough, and you're looking at those different scopes of things where instead of constraining ourselves, we're widening it. Does that make sense?
And so on the question of tech also, we talk about still sticking with Creation. Creation Engine 2 with Starfield, but moving to a third iteration of the engine with Elder Scrolls 6. What are the things that you need out of a third iteration of Creation as you are building a new game for it?
Gosh, I don't want to spoil too much. I mean, look, you get your whiz-bang rendering shiny pixel stuff that everyone would expect. And I think the change to Creation Engine 2 from where we were for Starfield was such an, upheaval for what we were doing. We felt coming out of it, we could have managed that better. So going into Creation Engine 3, I can't say enough about our tech staff and how they've handled that transition so that we can still be making a game while that is going on. I think it's, again, as we look at future tech, I already mentioned casting a pretty wide net and scaling way up and also down. I think there are things outside of the rendering that you would expect as it comes to data systems, how our worlds load, how they load content and present things of high detail close to the camera without spoiling it, So there's some foundational things that we felt we wanted to do the things we're doing in the future. And then obviously, like I said, all of the sort of graphics rendering things. But I think a lot of gamers, they were reacting what's on the screen as they should, but a lot of people think that is engine. And so the actual rendering, like the pixel shaders and everything that's happening, that's actually a smaller part of an engine than people think. The engine deals with data structures and loading and AI and save states and platform, like all of these things that go into an engine are far more than just the final frame.
Sure. I guess to a little bit more specific, talking about Starfield, with the Free Lanes update, interconnecting planets, kind of broadening the scope between planets. I know that was one of the big criticisms of the original release of Starfield, is that some players felt like there was a lack of exploration in space, and Free Lanes kind of is that answer to that question. Was that like an initial limitation of the tech, or is it just took time to figure out how to weave those things together? So take me behind a little bit about the technical aspect of creating Free Lanes for the Free Lanes update with Starfield.
Yeah, it was interesting. Obviously, if you look at Starfield, I think people who play it know, like when you're in a system, like around a star, all that stuff is there. And we had to make a decision in terms of like, where's the gameplay, right? So you jump into a system, flying through empty space, how much are we making that fun versus where you jump in, and then same thing landing on a planet. How are we making that fun? And so we more sort of made a decision of let's focus on the area you jump in and make that like ship experience the best it could be. But obviously, then you have a spaceship. You're like, well, I want to fly to that planet. I want to fly. Let's take that moment of like just even like flying around the moon. And we noticed mods, people doing it. Like, well, clearly the game can do it. So we sort of started with, you want in your spaceship to sort of fly around the planet. And so it was started there. Like, we're gonna have this mode where you're gonna go fast. And then it was, okay, well, that needs to have some gameplay. You know, what would you expect? And that's where we got into all of the systems that Free Lanes is. And it still is tricky in finding that balance of, well, it's empty space. If you're running into things all the time, then it doesn't feel like space. It starts feeling like an amusement park of just, there's stuff everywhere. So I think team's done great with a system in terms of, you know, the radar beeping and telling you, hey, there's something there to go find. So it's kind of up to you. Dealing with autopilot. It's fun. Actually, I have a lot of fun going into that mode and then getting up. So getting up out of my seat, and then the ship is just cruising at, you know, these crazy speeds through space, but I'm still able to, like, we had talked about that. I want to walk around my ship. I want to talk to the other characters. I want to do all these things in that mode. So yeah, it came out well.
One of the things I love picking the brain of people who've worked on RPGs for so long. I had a conversation with Leonard Boyarsky leading up to Outer Worlds 2 about how they think of RPG systems and creating friction for the player. I know, like, I still say Morrowind is one of my favorite RPGs to this day, because I look back on how much I had to like figure things out for myself. There's like a lot of friction that I enjoyed working, but he had some interesting answers, and I kind of want to throw that question to you as well. Like, especially as you continue to work on big RPGs that you want to appeal to a broad audience, but you know, Bethesda does have that history of, you know, letting players be free in this world and determining their, you know, what happens with choice and consequence. So as you are building new games, you're still thinking of how to revolutionize the genre. How are you thinking about choice and consequence and creating friction for players in a way that is still enjoyable for a broad audience?
That's a good question. I don't know that I agree with the word friction. I think it depends on the definition. I think it's choices that are interesting, where you know you chose one path over another. And that can also just be in a character system, like how you develop a character. You know, who do you want to be out of the gate? I think Starfield, you know, take that as an example compared to what we've had before with the backgrounds and, hey, you're going to start with these skills. And you sort of come out and say, hey, this is the character I want to role play. And so there's a pretty healthy debate here, I'll say, with no right or wrong answer, in terms of to have a different experience, to make a different character, at what point should you start over? And I think that's where you can maybe get into some friction. Where Oblivion, because it's remastered, when you play it again, it's a very clear game where you, a couple hours in, you're like, I think I chose wrong. And after Oblivion, I felt very strongly, I was seeing that a lot and thinking, I don't want that in my games. I don't want someone to be like, I made a mistake several hours ago and I have no way of correcting it, which is also why you see sort of the Skyrim system of, hey, you come out, you don't really pick a class. And even in Starfield or Fallout, you're sort of picking a starting point, but you can go in any direction. So if you feel you've made a mistake, you can still correct. There are other ways to do that also, where you get some scarcity, right? In that Starfield is a game with a character system where you can eventually, it's long, you can eventually get it all. Whereas you look at a 76 with cards, there's a scarcity. A lot of games, you know, RPGs in particular, I think there are games out there do quite a good job with like the scarcity of builds.
Earlier, you were mentioning, you know, time from announcement to actual release, and how that's like something you're a little bit more conscious of now. You know, talk about the Elder Scrolls 6 reveal.
Just pretend we didn't announce it.
Yeah. And
it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I remember talking to you.
No one's heard a word.
And in 2019, last time I talked to you, like Starfield was still a ways out, as imminent as it may have felt. You know, various factors happened between then and now. How do you feel about that now? Are you a little bit more conscious of what you share at what time?
Very much.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, I like to say I always start with, when you go and press play, you're about to play a game, like, what do you already know? What's in your head? What's your excitement level? What's your expectations? And I kind of back up from there. I prefer not to talk about stuff until I like to compress that moment, right? Where you hear about a game and you can play it. Those will be on top of each other if I had my way every time. That isn't like necessarily the best thing to do with every game. Sometimes you need to inform people, and there's business considerations and et cetera, et cetera. You know, if you look back at this Fallout 76, Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6 announcement, that was really around informing our audience, because when you're gonna do something new, everyone's gonna ask, what about Elder Scrolls 6? What about a single player game? And we did it that way, but it's not my preference. I will say, look, we struggle with the balance, because our fans want to know, they're amazing, and saying like, well, what are you doing? And so, well, I think they'd like to know, like, we're working on a lot of stuff. I think if you look at the scale of our studio, we could have 10 times the amount of people to do all this. We're doing so much, and it's just finding the right times to tell everybody about it. You look at Starfield today. I feel like the Starfield audience has been, what about us? And we had sort of balance with like, hey, the end of the fall was like a Fallout, the TV show, everything we were doing. And we knew like, hey, we're just gonna save the Starfield stuff to give it its spotlight during this time.
We also talked about earlier the way Bethesda kind of scales as a project goes on, and juxtaposing that with the many stories about AAA development being very long and being very expensive. And when people look at, as we mentioned, your time from announcement to release, it looks like that is such a long and expensive process. But you mentioned the way Bethesda scales it from pre-production to full production, and how that's, maybe it's works for you guys within your scope. So can you, for the audience out there, kind of take us behind the scenes of how you're able to manage those kind of AAA expectations, and some of your thoughts about how that has happened outside of Bethesda?
Yeah, for us, look, we've been fortunate that, all the games that we've done, have had big audiences, and many of them still have big audiences. So our prime job is always serving the millions of people currently playing a game. And when we start a new game, we're usually going to start smaller, and we can have pre-productions. We'll call it for like 2 years, sometimes 3 years, with a smaller staff to make sure we know what we're doing before we put a lot of people on it. That might be not wasting time, but doing work where everybody feels this might get redone. Some of that is necessary when you're making a new game, particularly a new IP. Like, some of this work is going to get redone. We sort of want to minimize that, do enough of that. And then once we have some runway, we've been fortunate to sort of balance, and then, a lot of the team members and our partners outside are coming onto a game. Like, we're at that point with Elder Scrolls 6, where the bulk of the studio is on it. A lot of our partners are on it, and we know, hey, this is what we're doing. So that's a good place to get to. But, a game like Fallout 76, going into its 67th update, full team on that. So when you have these very popular kind of live games, that's new for us, having it to that scale. And balancing amongst that. We're in a good spot now, but that's been sort of trickier for us these last few years to maneuver.
Since we're on the topic of Elder Scrolls 6, what can you tell me about
nothing?
Where it's at?
I've never heard of it.
Lessons you've learned from Starfield.
Pretend we never announced it.
From the lessons you learned in Starfield and how that's carrying over to Elder Scrolls 6. I know we asked that earlier, but due diligence and all that.
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
You should ask.
Yes.
I'll say what I say up there, because it's sort of I want to be careful what I say about Elder Scrolls 6 too, because I think everybody wants to know, and we want to find a time, obviously, that we'll talk about that in depth. But the one thing I'd say is really the tech. As we're going to Creation Engine 3, again, the team has done a really incredible job at not just pushing what it is, but how it's integrated into our development cycle. So you don't feel that what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, like the game goes down. So we're in a fortunate position where that's a game where, the builds are really consistently working every day. Not every day, but more days than we've ever had, where the build is good, new stuff is in it, we can play it. And when you're making those kind of technical changes we talked about, often you're pulling the rug out from the team we're making content. Be like, okay, that doesn't work for this period of time. You have to wait till we get that working again. And we've done a really good job of managing that on this. And Starfield, we struggled there for a number of years in terms of when we went through the engine change.
Yeah. Massive update for Starfield. I imagine there's still more ideas in the works, and the roadmap is going to be longer for the Starfield audience. So after this big update, what are you thinking for Starfield's future?
I could just say there's going to be more, right? Just like this process of here's all the things we want to do. Some of those may come out on their own. Some of those may be bundled together in a moment, but we have a list of what we're doing after this. We're excited about it just as well. So just also want to say thanks to our Starfield audience out there who's just given us so much great feedback, and the millions playing it. We're just really, really fortunate with a new game like this.
If you want to catch up on everything that's happening over at Bethesda and Starfield and a little bit of Elder Scrolls 6, stick with everything at IGN.